Hey all, I joined a little late, but maybe I'm missing. Did someone start this?
Hi, Jill, it's Christine. Well, it starts at 9:50 or at quarter past the hour, and I do see that it's already being recorded.
Yeah, okay. I
But
thought
I'm
it
not
was at 10
sure.
o'clock. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, no, it would be at 10:15 your time. It's kind of popped on your calendar at 10, but if you hover over it, it says it's from 10:15 to
Oh,
10:30 Mountain.
yes, I'm just ahead and I didn't know it. That's even better.
Totally, which
Sounds
is
good. I'll go
fantastic.
back. I'll go
Okay,
back on mute.
carry on. See you soon. Bye.
And we will get started. So as always, if you've got a question, a burning question, go ahead and put it into the chat. I'm more than happy to go over any questions that are on your mind about this topic or about any other topic. So chat in there if there's something that comes up or there's something that you really want to know. But for
¿Y la comadre no te ha hablado?
Oh, and go ahead and mute yourself. I think there might be a few that are not on mute. Hear a little bit of background noise. Thank you. But today we are going to talk about caffeine. So man, oh man, I was deciding on this and I'm like, you know, let's just go for it. Let's dig in deep here. I know this is probably near and dear to a lot of our hearts on what's up with caffeine. There's a lot of mixed messaging out there about, you know, the benefits of caffeine, which there are some, and, you know, some of the negative effects, which there are some as well. So let's really dig in. Let's really learn about, you know, what it is, what it can do for us, good, bad, and also taking a look at, you know, the caffeine content and different things. I think that's going to be really important. And we're starting to see that shift now, even with, you know, Starbucks coffee, they're starting to add more caffeine in, and a lot of different products, even, you know, foods now have more caffeine in them. So it's really interesting, you know, to take a good look at this topic. So if you are feeling brave and chatting in, how many of you have caffeine on a regular basis? You can put it in the chat box. A lot of yeses, right? Okay, some saying too much, some saying, you know, maybe one at home, right? Multiple times, right? So, you know, we're definitely living in a culture that's very caffeine forward, right? And caffeine focused. So let's just break it down though. You know, like I said, there are some redeeming benefits of caffeine, but we want to weigh them out here. All right, so caffeine just by definition is a stimulant. It actually works with our central nervous system, which is our brain and our spinal cord. So that's where most of it, you know, most of the effect is. The main reason why it keeps us from being sleepy or kind of gives us that alertness is that it blocks something called adenosine. So this is a neurotransmitter that actually builds up in our body and makes us feel tired. So we won't go through that whole pathway today, but that's where we feel the effects of caffeine, right? So it blocks that. It, doesn't kind of let our body, feel that tiredness anymore. So when we do that, it makes us feel alert. Now there's some secondary things that are also produced with caffeine, and that is it increases adrenaline and it increases dopamine and norepinephrine, if I can say it right. So what that is a very similar response to kind of our fight or flight. So when we have that fight or flight response, adrenaline is also kind of pumping out, right? And we know what this, feels like, right? When we kind of get a little amped up. So when the tired hormone is, coming down and this, epinephrine is ramping up, that's why we get this little jolt, right? That's why we get this jolt from caffeine and we feel differently, right? It makes us a little bit more alert. So let's break it down and see what all it does in our body here. So, we can see that, again, this is what I talked about. It does reduce appetite a little bit. So again, if it's kind of gearing us up and making us less sleepy, right? Because when we're sleepier, we tend to, our body's kind of shutting down and going into that, that mode. And so, maybe we're, refueling and regenerating. But when we're ramped up and amped up, we don't think about food as much, right? So that reduces our appetite a little bit. And, it can improve our memory. Again, we're kind of on that high alert a little bit with that epinephrine. So we've got that, concentration comes up, our focus comes up a little bit, but it can also do some other things, raise some, acidity in our stomach, which can do lead to heartburn, and a few of these other things here. It also increases our blood pressure, now temporarily, right? And again, some of this has to do with that kind of fight or flight response there that kind of gets us ready to go, right? So our body's kind of amping up to, take action and do things. So a little bit of that is okay, especially if we're going to, be active or, take fight or flight. But over a long period of time, it can be a little bit, rough on us here. And then, again, it stimulates those adrenal glands, which again is kind of the same effect that we see with, the stress response. So when we think about all those things happening in our body, we want to take a look at more of the long-term pros and cons of this, because, again, if we're using this on a regular basis, it can do some good things. And then, there are definitely some things that maybe aren't so good too. So let's look at the good things first, right? So we probably already have our own pros for this. If you want to type them in, that is also great, right? But one, again, because our body's kind of, amping up, it is good for our circulation a little bit, right? So the only way that our, brain can kind of wake up and, our heart's beating a little bit faster, but that circulation is getting around a little bit more. So that helps us with that alertness and that focus, et cetera. Also, it's, since usually, not always, but sometimes it's delivered in a warm liquid, that can also help with our circulation. So again, if you're doing more like coffee or tea, just that warm liquid can also help with some of that as well. If you have low blood pressure, that can actually be a benefit, right? If it actually raises your blood pressure a little bit. So that can be a good thing. It can open our lungs a little bit too. So with that one, we want to, again, think that might help us, maybe with asthma or, some of that, it again helps us to prepare, right, for fight or flight, so that lung opening can be a benefit there. Performance is a big one, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but when we see some of the pre-workouts that are out there now, a lot of them are now adding caffeine in there, again, because we've got that better circulation, our body's kind of amped up, like usually we can perform a little bit better, right? If we're, exercising, going for a run, lifting, doing those kinds of things. So again, that can help us a little bit. It can help us perform a little bit better there. But again, we'll have to weigh that in the balance, right, of what makes sense and making sure we're not overdoing it there. And then some say caffeine can actually help our skin a little bit. So just kind of in the brightness and the alertness. And again, you know, if you think about it, kind of if you're amped up a little bit, you're more focused and all of that, but there are some benefits to our skin. Or so for some of you, you're feeling sold on that, right? And you can see that there's even topical now. So I don't know, guys, if you pay much attention to this or not, but for some of us ladies, you know, you can see that there are masks or, you know, lotions and things like that we can put our skin that actually have a little bit of caffeine in them. So it's a whole different ball game on that. And I will not pretend to be an expert, but that is kind of a known benefit there. So 4 servings per day. What's a serving? Yeah, we'll talk about that. But, you know, if you're thinking of like a cup of coffee or whatever, that would be like kind of an 8-ounce there. The slide before this says, you know, about 400 milligrams. So you'll see that a cup of coffee has about 100 milligrams. So, you know, probably don't want to go over 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. Hopefully that helps. All right, so let's look at some of the more negative aspects of this response that we get from caffeine. One, if you have more than those 4 servings, there's a lot of evidence that shows that it actually, you know, does kind of lead into a shorter lifespan on that. So again, want to be careful of that and not, you know, overdo it for long periods of time. It's also habit forming. So just like other stimulants that are out there, you know, it is one that, you know, we can, you know, grow, and we don't love to use the word addicted, but, you know, our bodies get really used to it. We crave it in the morning. If we don't have it, we can have withdrawal symptoms. So it definitely is a habit forming, you know, product out there. So we've got to be, you know, again, just a little bit careful with that on there. And if we do think about decreasing it, we might also want to think about decreasing it slowly, right? So we don't get some of those effects from it. Now, it can cause headaches, and I know that this is a hit or miss because sometimes for people with migraines, you can take a little bit of caffeine and it actually helps, but long-term use can actually lead in, and it can be a trigger for some people to have headaches. So this is kind of, you know, one of those where, you know, you want to be a little bit careful there and just notice if it's a trigger for you or not. Medication interactions. So again, caffeine can affect sometimes the absorption, or it can actually boost some medication. So you might want to look at your labels if you're reading a lot, or if you're having a lot of caffeine and mixing that with prescription medication. That can sometimes be an issue there, especially if there's other stimulants, etc. It can play a part in anxiety and also depression. So this is one that they're learning more and more about. But again, with that adrenaline response and those adrenal glands, those are also the glands that can get tapped out if we've got high anxiety. So this can boost anxiety or sometimes kind of create a false sense of anxiety for us. So again, we want to be careful there. If that's something that you suffer with, you might really want to consider your caffeine consumption. For some of us, raising blood pressure is a bad thing. So if you naturally run low and you need to bring it up, that might be a good thing. But if you run high, then having a lot of caffeine can actually boost us up into that, you know, blood pressure range that's too high for us. That can cause other issues as well. For young people, and we're seeing more and more of this again with just the height of the energy drinks that are out there and how popular those are, with how popular coffee and coffee houses and, you know, different kind of coffee drinks that are, you know, fun and flavorful, etc. And then also, like I said, with those pre-workouts, we're seeing this more and more that younger people are having too high of exposure to caffeine and they're at risk for heart attacks and honestly overdose. So I've even talked to, you know, local physicians that I know, and they do see this, and some of them see it even with that pre-workout, even on the very first time that a person's tried to take that pre-workout. So again, you know, something to be thinking about, especially if you've got younger people in your lives or you are a younger person, and the caffeine intake there. It can flare gout a little bit. It can cause that urge to use the bathroom. So it can, play into incontinence a little bit as well. They're finding certainly can disrupt our sleep. On the other page, which I didn't talk about this one, but right here, when it says it takes about 5 or 6 hours before the caffeine you've ingested wears off, you can see that, in taking in caffeine later in the day, maybe we don't feel that very first effect, but it will take a while for that completely to get out of our system. So, starting, if you're going to have a little bit of caffeine, starting it earlier in the day and really monitoring how much you have later and later in the day can help with better sleep patterns and certainly decrease insomnia as well. We talked a little bit about indigestion as well, right? With the other one, just kind of playing into that stomach acid piece. There are some links now with fertility, miscarriage, and menopause concerns. And again, just because there's a lot of hormones that are affected with caffeine, and it can play a little bit of a part in that. And then also vitamin absorption. So I don't know if you've ever taken calcium, or maybe your doctor's prescribed it, but a lot of times they'll tell you, don't take it in the morning with your coffee, or don't take it with, a caffeinated beverage, because that will block the absorption of some of that as well. So also plays into, bone health long-term and that ossification process as well. So I know some of you are not happy to see here that there are more cons than pros, because some of those pros are really important to us, but to know that, either overdoing it with caffeine or really long-term use could play a little bit of a part. So again, I don't think it's the enemy. It's about, finding that balance for ourselves and also just knowing the risks there. Are there questions on this? All right, so let's take a look at how many milligrams of caffeine are found in different ones. And again, like I said, some of these are probably even outdated because they're shifting some of these milligrams fairly often here. So we can see where some of these things play out. Even decaf coffee and green tea, they have a little bit of caffeine in them. But we can see how this kind of ramps up by looking at, black tea drinks, looking at, our sodas. So I think Coke is listed on here, but, a few of the other sodas are going to be maybe a little higher or lower on that. And then looking at things like, espresso, and then our different, energy drinks, the pre-workout that I was talking about, which if you don't know what that is, it's a kind of a powder that people might take before they go do a workout in the gym. And again, the idea there is that it's giving them some beneficial things that are going to boost their workout. But a lot of them, even if you looked at a few years ago, they didn't have as much caffeine as they do now. And now they're really putting a lot of caffeine in there. So certainly be careful as an adult, but really watch that if you've got, younger adults in your life, because this is really, like I said, becoming a little bit more of a problem there. Yep. And drip coffees actually usually have a little bit more caffeine in them. I learned recently that even with tea, like green tea or other black tea, if you're making like a cup of tea, the longer you leave the tea bag in there, the longer you let it steep, the more caffeine is in there. So yeah, it definitely is one where it's important to realize, just how much is in there. And if you are a person that's doing, multiple cups, or, maybe you're starting with coffee and then having a soda or something in the afternoon, we could see that, we could get to that, pretty quickly. And again, if you have some of those symptoms, or if you are at risk for some of those, things that we talked about kind of in the negative aisle there, it might be something to watch in general, your caffeine intake. You've had to switch to green tea. Yeah, I know. So, it's one where if we really back off of it, our body will come to a natural, energy level. I'm going to show a chart about that in just a minute here. And I get it. I think, it's probably best to tap into natural energy sources, and then, use caffeine just, when we need it, and try not to rely on it on a regular basis. But what about I don't know about that one exactly. I'm sure that information is out there. I'm not a big Starbucks person, so I don't know, all the different drinks and what their caffeine level is, but you can probably take a look at, even the, how many shots of espresso it has in it and, do the math, on that there. So probably is enough for the day. I'll just say that. Again, some of these drinks here are becoming more and more popular. And you can see that some of them are really packing a punch, right? And I work with a lot of young people, have interns and stuff in and out of my office, and a lot of them are carrying these around quite often. And so it always opens the door for me to have a discussion with them about that. But you can see that sometimes it looks like it's a pretty good choice because there's not a lot of sugar, there's not a lot of calories, but there still is quite a bit of caffeine in these. So we do want to be careful. And we also want to think about what's hitchhiking for the ride. So when we are drinking these, there's also a lot of other chemicals, sweeteners, sugars, food colorings, things like that, that we probably also want to be careful of putting them in our body. And so if you are going to do caffeine, I really much prefer the whole food source of, just regular coffee, tea, those kinds of things. So, all right. And then again, in these pre-workout supplements, they're just becoming more and more popular, and you can see some of them just for one serving. And I think there was a TikTok thing out there, again, not super great with all of that, but there was a challenge where people were trying to do dry. So they were just eating the powder dry, or they were trying to do 2 or 3 scoops. And that is where we're really starting to see some issues. So really be careful with these. And again, if you're putting them in combination with other caffeinated beverages, again, might just be something to watch out for there. All right, I want to end with this. I know we're right at time. If you have to drop off, I totally understand. We'll record this and get it out there. But I want to bring this up because I want to just look at this, these lines. So this little, the light blue line there is kind of our normal performance and normal energy levels. So without caffeine, just our day-to-day, if we were, eating well, sleeping well, this would be our natural performance and energy. When we have caffeine, this is the red line. So you can see that we get that boost, we get that lift for sure. We've got that alertness and all of that, but then you can see that it actually drops us off, not where we started from before, but it actually drops us off a little bit lower than that. And so what happens is then, the next time we have that caffeine, and especially if we're doing this on a regular basis, it will continue to get lower and lower. So our starting line, that starting red line for the next, cup of coffee that we have, is going to be a little bit lower. And that's why a lot of mornings, especially if you're a regular caffeine user, you feel like you need it just to get to baseline, right? And that's a real thing, right? Because we would need that just to close that gap. And then we probably need a little bit more if we need that extra boost. So over time, you really want to watch, out for this. And, even if you can take a break for a day or two and not do high amounts every day, I would say that would be beneficial because you're going to, still get some of the benefits of it, but you're not going to see some of these repercussions, and it's not going to, totally tap you out and totally become habit forming there. So, just wanted to lay it out there. There are some benefits. I think there is a safe amount to consume, but we do want to be careful and not overdo it. There's some long-term, risk with that, especially at high amounts. The other slide with the human body. Sure, absolutely. So I will bring that up. That's really all I've got today. Everyone, thanks for hopping on. Go out there, just be mindful as you're going throughout your day. Think about that caffeine. Take a look at, the milligrams if you can find it out there, and just kind of see where you stack up for that. So take care, everyone. You are welcome. Bye now.